I started saying the sentences because the nights were louder than the days. I downloaded the little app on a Dare 3 calming tracks, a timer, and a daily set of night affirmations you were supposed to whisper to yourself as you fell asleep. The first night it was like someone smoothing a sheet over my chest. The fourth night, the app said my name in a voice that was almost my own. By the seventh night, whatever it was that lived in the ward learned how to repeat back what I said. I was admitted to Ward C after the car. They kept telling me that in soft, professional tones, the doctors, the intake nurse, the social worker who wrote my history into neat columns. Memory of the crash came and went like a radio station cutting in and out, a curve of rain, the echo of metal, a dark shape on the highway. What I clearly remembered was the insomnia that followed. I couldn't turn my brain off. The ward's fluorescent lights hummed through the day, and the walls kept their silence at night. Sleep arrived only as a threat, a room spinning, and me awake, listening to the pipes. A fellow patient old man with a trembling hand noticed me rubbing my temples on the fourth night and slid his phone across the bedside table. "Try this," he said. "Helps me get under the skin of the light." He didn't speak as if he believed in niceties. Maybe because the ward reduces you to your need. I downloaded the app with the ward's Wi-Fi and a password that expired at midnight. It was called simply Night, and it asked me for two things, my name and one thing I needed to hear. I typed Ethan in because names make you accountable, even to yourself. Then I typed, "It's safe." The app generated a green check and told me to set it for 15 minutes. The first time I recited the affirmations, the voice was male, gentle, impersonal. I felt ashamed of how quickly calm washed over me like clean water when you're parched. The voice said, "You are safe. You are allowed to rest." I could feel my heartbeat slow. The nurse did her rounds. The old man across the room snored. The hum of the world cannibalized itself into white noise and I slept. Sleep in a hospital is a strange, thin thing. You never know if your rest is owned by your mind or by the medications that loosen the corners of your thoughts. Waking up, I would sometimes find the app's timer paused, like a bookmark between two lives. Other nights the screen was smudged with the ghost of fingerprints that weren't mine. It didn't take long before the affirmations started to diverge from their soothing scripts. Night 5. "Your breath keeps the light in you," the voice said. I repeated it dutifully. A nurse passed outside the ward, and I watched the reflection of her cart ripple across the glass. That night, I woke with the feeling of being watched, no shadow, no face, but the sensation of someone reading over my shoulder. I told myself it was paranoia. The ward was built of paranoia. Night 6. The app offered a new line I hadn't written. "There are names that remember you." I frowned into the dark and whispered it, lips almost touching my teeth. The old man from the other bed mumbled in his sleep my name, Ethan, like the app had left its residue in his mind overnight. I chalked it up to coincidence. There are always strange overlaps in places where everyone is brittle. On night 9, the affirmation became a question. Who will say you first? The voice slowed on the word first and dragged the syllable like a searching finger along a table edge. I didn't have an answer. The ward felt smaller that night. The doors felt like ribs. At 2:13 a.m., the overhead speaker, usually dead, coughed a static whisper. The old man woke with a start and clutched his blanket like it was a life raft. "They listen," he said. "They hear the ones who can't finish." I started to record the affirmations. Not for therapy, because I am not the sort of person who volunteers for more help, but because when your mind is fraying, you try to document the fraying pattern. I set my phone to record, closed my eyes, and read the sentences aloud as the app suggested. Playback produced the same gentle tenor, but every recording had a soft undercurrent. A second voice that arrived like reverb, always delayed by a half second, like someone repeating you from the next room. Sometimes the echo used my words. Sometimes it answered. "You're safe," I heard the delayed voice say in my recording. "Until they wake." I stopped telling nurses about the app. The staff had a patience meter, and I wasn't keen to become another checkbox in the day as roster. Besides, some parts of the ward's language are made to congeal into your bones. When you explain, they fix you with a knowledgeable look and prescribe a solution. Instead, I started trading notes with a woman in the next bay who called herself Mara. Mara claimed she worked in a school before the world slipped. She had a bed with a photograph pinned above it, kids in windbreakers lining up by a gym door. She told me she didn't use the app. She had a pocket notebook instead, and she'd write lists groceries, names of places she'd been until the page smelled like toothpaste. If things start talking back, she told me, you listen to see if it's the thing you fear or the thing you need. The affirmations got personal. The app learned small things. My tendency to chew my thumbnail when anxious, the nickname my sister gave me as a child. Lines appeared that mirrored my private thoughts. You forgive the driver. I hadn't told the app about the crash, but it found the crater where I kept that guilt. You made it out, the voice consoled. You earned the silence. I began to suspect the app had scraped something notes from intake forms, whispered conversations in the ward lounge. Maybe it had access to the hospital's patient files. Maybe someone had programmed it to sound like you. Then the recordings changed in a way that the hospital files couldn't explain. In the background of my audio, behind my voice and the apps, there was rhythm, soft, regular tapping like fingernails on bone. It wasn't the building. The pipes could be loud, but this sound was too deliberate. I replayed the clip until my ears bled, slowed it down, sped it up, let it go while I made coffee. The tapping never resolved into anything sensible. It was a tempo that suggested counting. The next night, the app's affirmation said, "Count with us. Counting is harmless until it's not." The voice started the count at 1, and the old man next to me answered 2 in a flat, exhausted whisper. Across the ward, other murmurs followed 3, 4, 5, until the numbers knitted the room into a single thing. When we reached 7, someone in the far bay began to sob, quietly at first, then like air tearing through fabric. The nurse flicked on the light and checked vitals, and the sobbing stopped. The counting resumed under the hum of the fluorescent light like a secret thread. I woke on night 11 to a red smear on my palm. I thought I'd cut myself in the night, that in the dream I must have clawed at the sheets. But the skin was intact. The smear was not blood. It felt like dried iron, and the smell, when I cupped my hand, smelled like metal and old roses. Mara, who was awake, saw me staring and handed me a little slip of paper. It was folded small and worn at the edges like it had been through many pockets. On it were 3 words scrawled in a small, uncertain script. "They repeat what you keep. People bring things here," Mara said, eyes calm and austere. "We put them in pockets. We say them again. If you keep saying their names, they gather." I laughed, a bitter sound in the quiet. "Gather what?" "Attention," she said. "Memory likes company." At breakfast, a new patient arrived. He was thin and smelled like rain, and his palms had the same iron scent as my smear. He sat alone at the far table, shoulders hunched, eyes on the floor. When he looked up, he met my gaze and said, without preamble, "Do you remember the wrong affirmations?" I didn't know to be afraid yet, so I said yes, like it was normal. He smiled in a way that had nothing in it and said, "They taught me to sleep by asking me to list them." I said 7 names. At 7, the lights blinked and somebody took my name into their mouth. That afternoon, I found another note in the common room, this one taped under the arm of a chair. The handwriting matched the slip Mara gave me. It was a list of affirmations, but mixed among the expected sentences were names. Not long lists, just single names carved between commas. My own name sat there with 4 other names I didn't recognize. Underneath, someone had written, "Not all comforts are made for sleep." The ward had rules about belongings. You could keep what fit in a shallow locker, a book, a toothbrush, a photograph. But the things people kept were always more than that: an old watch, a bus token, a child's crayon, a dried leaf. They were talismans against the erasure of self. When the names started appearing in the affirmations, it was like someone had taken those talismans and threaded them into a rope. The rope pulled. One night, the app suggested a custom affirmation based on my day. Repeat the names you won't lose. I didn't create it. When I closed my eyes, the voice paused on each syllable as if making space for something behind me to answer. I whispered the names out loud, names I had never spoken in the ward. Each name made a different sound against the ceiling, the dent of it, the way it shaped into a hollow. The delayed voice on my recording didn't repeat my words exactly. It imitated the rhythm of my inflection, then added a seventh name I didn't know. The seventh name tasted like cold tiles and a hospital plate smashing. I confronted Mara. She listened, her hands in her lap. "There was a ward once in the city," she said slowly. "They used to do music therapy. They would keep rhythm to regulate patients. The rhythm made us feel less alone. But rhythm becomes a map when you teach it to people. Every map is a promise. If you teach people to count and feed them names, the counting becomes an address." "An address for what?" I asked. "For whatever wants directions," she said. That night I tried to stop. I turned the phone face down and put it in the locker, as if hiding the thing would unteach the ward. The old man snored. The overhead speaker was dead. The hallway outside hummed with the night nurse's cart. I closed my eyes and tried to conjure nothing: white space, black space, forgetfulness. Instead, in the black, my breath sounded like a bell. A voice thin, tasting like copper threaded into the dark. Not from the app, not from a speaker. It came from inside the ward as walls, as though the pipes themselves had learned how to speak patient names. "Ethan," it said, and my skin went cold. I wasn't sure if it had been the voice or my own need to shape an enemy. The next morning, someone's mattress was empty. The nurses marked it down in a ledger. The police were not called. There was a procedural memo: a temporary absence, eloped from inpatient care, narrative to be continued. The empty bed had a blanket folded at the foot and a notebook left open, pages mottled with shorthand. In the margin, someone had written, "We sing what we feed." After that, names multiplied like fever. When a new patient arrived, other patients wrote their names in the margins of magazines, in the blank edges of coloring pages, over the wrists of one another in pen, so the ink cooled like a compass. We began to whisper the new names before sleep like a liturgy. It gave us the illusion of control. It gave the thing in the walls a menu. Once, at 3:06 a.m., I heard a chorus, not human, not made of lungs but of echoes placing words into a structure I could only describe as a door. The sound was patient and exact. Each patient across the ward added a plank. The voice would say a sentence. We would repeat it. That was the bargain. We did not know the price yet. All we knew was the comfort of cadence. I stopped using the app publicly, but found ways the phrases wormed into me. A doctor would ask about my mood, and I'd say steady, and the word would lay a tile in some invisible floor. A nurse asked if I felt like leaving the ward to smoke, and I'd mutter, later, and it would become a latch. Gradually, the room's edges blurred into permission slips I didn't sign. Once, Mara drew a diagram on the back of a diet sheet, circles within circles, with arrows and tiny X's. In the center, she wrote sleep. Around it, she circled say, repeat, remember. Outside the outer ring, she wrote no exit, then crossed it out. They work from the middle out, she said. Teach them to rest. Teach them names. It builds them a body. Her fingertips smudged the ink. I don't want to believe it, but it's like feeding a ghost the slave words to bind it. I began to test the edge of the thing. One night I repeated a line wrong on purpose. You will not wake, when the app had silently suggested, you will wake rested. Silence followed. A clock ticked loud. I felt like an intruder in my own skull. When I woke, the old man across from me was sitting upright, eyes empty. And he mouthed without sound, "You said it wrong." He put his hands to his throat as if he could feel a seam there. My mispronunciation had been a provocation. The ward, which had felt like a bottle holding us in a steady brine, began to tilt. People had started leaving. Sometimes they would simply be gone. Sometimes they would take a step into the hallway and be led out by a nurse who said, in that flat, compassionate voice, "He's being discharged. We were told these things happen, patients leaving for home after assessment, transfers." Sometimes the police took a name. Sometimes a bed was left folded because the person had eloped. No one startled. We had become practiced in small disappearances. The app finally offered a new affirmation. When you call them, they come. On the recording, the delayed voice intoned the line and added the same seventh unknown name. That night, I refused to say it. I held my breath until my lungs hurt. I stared at the ceiling and watched the shadow from the vent creep like a slow, patient animal. The ward was on the edge of something, like the lip of a well. At 1:12 a.m., the intercom crackled and the night nurse's voice came over more tired than usual. "Routine check," she said. She set her clipboard down and walked past my bed. In the hallway, a door creaked open, the old maintenance door that led to a narrow service stair. The night nurse paused like she'd forgotten something, then continued her rounds. Later, I would learn she had gone to the stair and stayed for a long time, listening. The counting restarted in my head like a leaking faucet. My chest tightened. I took the app and smashed it against the sink in the bathroom until the glass spider webbed. I left the body of the phone on the tiles because I wanted the device to be ruined, to sever the chain at its most obvious link. I thought that if the app couldn't tell the ward new phrases, the pattern would break. Maybe it would. Breaking the phone didn't break the sound. That night I heard a chorus of voices chanting my childhood nickname in perfect timing with the pipes. Each syllable felt like a finger pressing the crease between my ribs. I got up, dizzy and clumsy, and opened my door. The corridor was empty. I walked toward the maintenance stair and heard the counting, no longer soft, now organ-like and purposeful. Down the stairwell, voices layered over one another with names and tiny commands. At the landing, the air smelled like iron and toothpaste, and at the base of the stair, a door I had never noticed stood ajar. Beyond it was not a storage closet, but a room with a single chair facing a wall. On the wall, someone had written in hurried, trembling script, "We name what we need to keep." A figure sat in the chair. At first I thought it was a maintenance worker, bent over. Then the figure looked up. It was the man who had arrived smelling of rain weeks before. But his eyes were wrong pale and unfocused, like light passing through glass. He tilted his head and said, directly, "You brought your name." "What are you?" I whispered. He smiled, and the smile was patient and has no pity. "We are what remembers when you don't. We are the echo you train," he said. We were taught how to be called. I couldn't tell if the voice came from him or from the room itself. Behind his shoulder, the wall pulsed faintly with the rhythm of names, as if 1,000 patient voices had been pressure molded into the plaster. They listen for the notes you give them. You feed them the notes, and they build a song. There was a pitch in that room, a register above speech where logic thinned. I felt fingers unbraid inside my chest. "If I stop naming is a lullaby and a leash," he said. "You can't simply stop. Not if you already fed the melody." I ran back up the stairs and into the night air of the ward corridor, lungs burning. I told the nurse, and she wrote it down in the same practiced hand and said there'd be a review. They called the psychiatrist. I was medicated that day and given discharge paperwork to sign when I felt stable. I refused to sign anything. The ward was full of forms that wanted you to consent to lying down. I started to keep silent on purpose. I swallowed my name when people tried to say it. I wore a scarf and a hat even indoors, something small and childish that made me feel as if I could hide my edges. But silence is a language too, and the ward began to answer in other ways. Nights got colder. The taps in the sink sounded like fingers opening locks. When someone clapped their hands, the sound echoed back with a delay as if the building had recorded it for later use. On the morning I left, what they call discharge, I remember the light in the clinical window like a white stage. I walked out through doors that smelled of lemon cleaner and the building sighed as I passed. The nurse shook my hand and said to keep taking the meds. The old man in the bed 2 doors down gave me a folded slip of paper and whispered, "When you repeat, don't let it be ours." Outside, the city pressed against my face cars, a pigeon, a woman with a stroller. The air seemed ordinary. I told myself the ward had been a conspiracy of tired people and cruel coincidence. People do that, reassign events into normality. But you can't unhear the echo of your name when it has been used as a key. The first night home, I avoided affirmations. I put my phone in a drawer and left it there. I refused to speak names aloud. Sleep still came hard and shallow. In the dark, sometimes I heard counting far away, like someone on another street counting to keep from disappearing. Once, in the thin half-waking of 2 in the morning, a voice soft and intimate as breath murmured through the walls, "Ethan, say them so they will rest." I froze. The voice felt like the ward bent into my apartment. I didn't answer. I lay and listened to the city and tried to breathe. The voice came again, closer this time. "You taught us to sing. We know the tune." One name, 2. I felt something pull at the hollow under my ribs. A panic that wasn't exactly fear, but the memory of pressure. My tongue itched with the need to make sound. There are times in life you find out what you truly need is not what you think, not the need to be seen, but the need to be recognized in the exact way the world asks. I grabbed a notebook and began to write not names this time, but the small list of mundane things. Milk, oil, a light bulb. I wrote them like talismans against the compulsion. Then, in the margin, someone had scrawled a single word in handwriting that wasn't mine. It read, "Sleep." The hand trembled in my chest. I didn't leave the apartment. I gaslighted myself with grocery lists and invoices and unsubscribed from every app. The city moved on around me. Towers glittered, people loved and left. Yet the counting persisted, sometimes below the hum of traffic, sometimes like hands on my door. Once in a while, when I opened my mouth to tell a friend about the ward, another voice would ease in and finish my sentence with a name that made me sick. Months later, how many? It's hard to track time when nights are thick. The old man from the ward called me. His voice on the phone was paper and whisper. "They sleep better now," he said. "They have a body, but we are light, we drift. We need you to keep telling them you're safe." He stopped and then added, "But you shouldn't tell anyone else." The call ended. I sat with the receiver warm against my ear. The line hummed for a long time. Then my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. 4 words. "They sleep when you tell." I have not returned to that hospital. I have tried to keep myself from saying the names that were not mine to keep. Sometimes in the dark, I catch the rhythm of a half-remembered affirmation in the back of my throat, and it becomes a tidal pull toward the window. There are nights I almost whisper a name to test if it still moves the world the way it used to. I stop myself because I don't know if the ward gave the songs to me, or if I always had them and only later taught them how to find me. If you're wondering whether this is really what happened, if the app or the ward or the thin voices in the pipes taught me a dangerous lullaby, you should know one thing. Comfort is a skill, and it can be taught with cruelty. The things that want us to sleep are rarely the same things that want us to wake. Sometimes I write the names in the margins of my notebook safe, private lists of the grocery kind, and then I tear the pages out and burn them in the sink until the ash looks like gray confetti. Sometimes I go out and stand under streetlights and count backward and tell myself that erasure is possible. Sometimes I lie and say I don't know any names at all. Mostly, I try to keep my mouth a closed place. At night, when the city flattens into its small sounds, I still hear the rhythm of counting. It is softer now, as if someone is testing a new melody. I imagine it moving like tide across neighborhoods, into other buildings with their own closets and pipes and tired rooms. I imagine people pronouncing the soothing lines into their pillows, thinking it will make the world kinder. Maybe it will. Maybe it will also show whatever listens the way into their homes. I do not use any affirmation apps anymore. If you ask me whether affirmations work, I will say they do for a while. They set your mind in a loop. They teach you to answer before the world asks. That is their power. That is their danger. If you ever download something called Night and it asks for your name, be careful. Say only what you are certain you want to share. Know that the quiet in the night can be very hungry for company, and that some comforts are doors in disguise. When you breathe and whisper, make sure you are the only voice in the room. If the voice ever says your name in a tone you know is yours, do not answer. Hold the silence like a shield. Count backward if you must. Remember the grocery lists, the light bulb, the milk. Keep your mouth full of ordinary things. If they knock at your door with a chorus of names, do not let it in. I write this not because I have all the answers. I'm still trying to sleep, but because I learned one more thing the hard way. Some affirmations are rehearsals. Some rehearsals train something you did not want to be trained. And once a thing knows how to be called, it will never forget the sound of your voice.